week's program, we're going to be talking about a variety of things, including where wool is at the moment. We're also going to be looking at why you should sedate your horses when the dentist calls. But in just a moment or two, with the myrtle rust hitting New Zealand and the hutakawas and a variety of other plants totally at risk, the seeds are being sent to a very special place in the Arctic known as the seed vault. What is it? We'll find out in just a moment. Brian, who or what is the seed vault?
The Svalbard Global Seed Vault is the backup to the global system of conservation of crop diversity. It is where collections go to make sure that their collections are safe in the future. So they make a safety backup, like a safety deposit box in a bank.
So, Brian, who's funding it?
The Seed Vault was built and funded by the Norwegian government in 2008. The annual operating costs of the Seed Vault are provided by the Crop Trust and the Norwegian government. The work of maintaining the collection is managed by the Nordic Gene Bank, Nordgen.
Did they come up with the idea?
A long time ago, the Nordic Gene Bank actually stored their crop collection in an abandoned cave mine up in Svalbard. The idea of conserving and backing up diversity has been around for 100 or so years, even more. And this concept of the seed vault was thought about by many people, but the reason why the seed vault in Longyearbyen now exists is because of a man named Kerry Fowler. He was the director of the Crop Trust, and he recognized that we needed this backup. And so he approached the Norwegian government to create this seed vault in Norway, and that's how it all started.
Who's the Crop Trust?
The Crop Trust is an international organization working to conserve crop diversity worldwide. We are working to create and fund a global system for the conservation of crop diversity in crop collections worldwide.
Now, an interesting thing, but why was Norway chosen?
Svalbard is an interesting choice for the location of the vault, and it has many reasons as to why it's there. One being that there is this Svalbard Treaty, which allows for anybody to basically be in the area, meaning that you can have seeds from North Korea and South Korea on the same shelf. Other reasons include the fact that it's cold. It's the farthest north you can fly in a commercial airline. And in the permafrost, in the mountain, you have a consistent temperature of -7 degrees Celsius. The optimal storage conditions for seeds for long-term conservation is -18 degrees Celsius. So you already have a degree of cold that you don't have to bring down through artificial cold, which makes it a good place to do that in comparison to a +40 degree weather in the Philippines.
Having picked the ideal spot, how do you actually choose the seeds that you're going to store?
Around the world, there are about 1,750 collections of crop diversity. Not all of them contain unique varieties. These collections contain about 7 million varieties, but only 2 to 2.5 of these are unique. So the seed vault is meant to store the unique diversity of crops. So in order to deposit to the seed vaults, collections are required to deposit unique varieties. And these crops are only for food security.
So it's only agricultural crops?
There is one box in the seed vault that contains flora and fauna, and that is from the local Svalbard area. The rest of the collection in the seed vault is for agricultural crops.
Why one box?
The one box of flora and fauna from Svalbard was chosen as a consideration for the fact that the seed vault is located on this far northern archipelago in Longyearbyen. And it was a collection that the university put together, and it was kind of a symbolic representation of diversity and life in Svalbard.
How up to date are you as far as the vault is concerned?
The seed vault gets deposits from collections 3 times a year, and currently contains more than 830,000 different samples. Obviously, we would like to get it to the full 2 to 2.5 unique varieties in the world, but that's a long process.
Now, the varieties, you've got some basic ones like rice, I guess, but what about, is there anything sort of GM?
So I'll start with the rice question. In the world, there are about 200,000 varieties of rice. These are all unique varieties. And the majority of them are stored inside the seed vaults. The seed vault contains this natural diversity from across the world, about 830,000, 40,000 varieties. Norwegian law prohibits GM crops and food from entering their borders. So likewise, the seed vault does not allow GM crops.
Any withdrawals been made from the bank so far?
In 2015, we saw the first seed retrieval from the seed vault. This was a collection called the International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas, and they held their collection in Aleppo, Syria. Because of the civil strife, the collection was not able to maintain the work required of it. Collections in the world are not only meant to hold as a backup, but they're actually meant to work with scientists and breeders. They're meant to send and share the material so that we can improve agriculture for the future. They were unable in the conditions in Aleppo, Syria now, or in the past 5 years, to really do their job as effectively as possible. Now, they were doing a great job. They were still sending out shipments of seeds, with war going on. But it wasn't optimal. And so ICARDA decided that it was time for them to reestablish their collection in a different country that they can more safely resume their activities. So in September of 2015, they received about 38,000 varieties from the seed vault that they had deposited, because only those who deposit can retrieve their seeds, and brought them to Morocco and Lebanon to restart their collection.
Is it a concern that there has been a withdrawal?
Of course, we don't want that to happen. We don't want seeds to be withdrawn because it means something's bad happened in the world. But it proves the point that the seed vaults exist for a reason, and we need it. And it proves the point that this work is extremely important. And before the seed vaults, this work didn't get the credit it deserved. People are working on a daily basis to make sure that the food on your plate remains into the future. And the seed vault provides that safety net.
What role do you see for the future?
So the collections around the world are doing the actual work on a day-to-day basis. They're working with scientists and breeders to develop new crops. But as shown in Syria, things can happen. There are natural disasters, there's war, anything could happen to these collections. And the seed vault is integral in making sure that we don't lose these options for the future. Each single seed might provide a trait that can be used to adapt to a new condition, whether it's a pest and disease, drought, climate change, anything. And the seed vault provides this backup for our food security system. So
what's the Crop Trust involvement?
The Crop Trust is working to create this global system and fund it. We were built in 2004 to establish an endowment fund that would provide the necessary funding that these collections around the world need on a yearly basis. Because something as simple as a power outage or not paying the electricity bill can result in the loss of diversity and an extinction event. So our job is to make sure that these collections are secure. So we are working to raise money to do this. We're very happy that just this year, New Zealand made an announcement, a pledge of 2 million New Zealand dollars to the endowment. And we're working with countries around the world to raise that endowment fund.
Has New Zealand actually made a contribution as yet?
We will have a deposit to the Svalbard Global Seed Vaults on Monday, the 23rd of May. It will become the first deposit by New Zealand. The Margot Ford Germplasm Center will deposit around 700 varieties of crops. Clover and ryegrass will be deposited by New Zealand. So we're very excited to welcome the first deposit by New Zealand.
So apart from Norway and New Zealand, what other countries are involved, if any?
As of right now, we have 66 different institutions that have deposited to the seed vaults. We'd obviously like that number to grow, but that's at times difficult. We require funding, political interference can occur, but the seeds in the seed vault have originated from every single country in the world. So we're getting there.
What else is the Crop Trust involved in?
While the Crop Trust is building this global system and working to manage and fund many of these collections around the world, we're also working to fill the gaps in the global system. There are crops growing in the wild in natural conditions without human influence that are the wild cousins of what is grown in our fields today. These crop wild relatives contain hardy traits that we can use to adapt our agriculture to the conditions we face in the future. So through a 10-year commitment from the Norwegian government, we are collecting, conserving, and using these crop wild relatives to improve our agriculture. And we're very excited about this. We have collecting agreements with nearly 20 countries, and we'll be going out over the next 2 years and collecting this diversity, storing them in collections, eventually backing them up in the seed vaults, but also providing them to breeders so that they can use them to improve agriculture, to improve the crops that we have in our fields today against the rising temperatures, pests, and diseases, which these crops in the wild naturally are protecting against.
What about the United Nations? Do they have a role as far as the whole diversity is concerned?
The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals actually have a target in there in Goal 2 of ending hunger. 2.5 says by 2020, we should conserve the diversity and wild diversity of crops in the gene banks in the world, international, national, and regional collections. So this is a very good indication that the governments of the world recognize the importance of crop diversity and recognize the importance of using this diversity to adapt our agriculture and be able to feed our future despite climate change and despite the challenges of a rising population.
So let's hope that we never ever do need to rescue those seeds, but it's good to know that they are in a safe place. In just a moment or two, we'll be talking to a horse dentist and finding out why you should really sedate your horses before they open their mouths. We go to the dentist normally about every 6 months, but what about horses? What are the problems that horses face dentistry-wise?
Well, the main problem is that they have what we call hypsodont teeth. And what that means is that their teeth grow to a certain length, and they have what we call this reserve crown, and it sits up inside the skull. And through the lifetime of the horse, this tooth will wear off on the surface, and it will keep erupting into the mouth. Okay, so this is a really good design for where horses are intended to live, which is a very dry, semi-arid environment. But we have taken horses out of that environment and put them into our domestic, very soft grass type of situation, which isn't the best for their teeth. And what happens is you tend to get irregular wear patterns with those teeth, is the most simple way I can put it.
There's a lot of tooth that's in the skull.
Exactly, and that has to last the horse's lifetime. So generally you would get 1 to 2 millimetres of tooth erupting through the gum line a year, and that is the rate it will be wearing off. But if for some reason a tooth doesn't have opposition, that rate can increase a lot, and you get what we call hypereruption, and teeth can become quite protuberant. They stick up and they cause blocking problems. The other thing is that often horses won't use the whole of the surface to grind with, what we call lazy eaters, because our food is quite soft, and then you get parts of the tooth left that hasn't worn away that should have. So most of our work is actually taking away tooth that should have worn away in a natural situation.
So what are you looking for? Are you looking for spurs, or are you just...
Basically anything. Like the teeth should form a nice arcade row of teeth, and anything that goes outside that row is a problem for the horse. And the reason being, like when a horse eats, we've got this lovely skull here to demonstrate, its jaw basically goes down, out, up and across in a circular motion. And this horse can't do it because it's locked, and it's also dry because it's a skull. So we've got this circular pattern going on. So anything that stops that mouth from being able to do that rotation smoothly is a problem for the horse, not only in its eating but also in its comfort. And it also interferes with the way that the horse can perform when we ride it. The mouth needs to be able to go sideways for the horse to be able to turn its body and flex through the whole body. If it can't do that, it will have various ways of getting out of it, which usually become problems for us as riders. The other thing so we obviously need a side-to-side motion for the horse's mouth, and the other thing is it needs to be able to go backwards and forwards slightly with rostral caudal movement, and it's about that much. It's a very small amount of movement, but if it can't do that, it's going to be uncomfortable when it's being ridden and it won't be able to perform properly. Like its hind legs won't come underneath, it'll hollow, it'll throw its head up. They've got lots of different ways of getting out of doing what we want them to because they're not comfortable if the mouth can't function.
So what are you looking for when you open the mouth?
I'm looking for no sharp teeth and nice uniform sets of teeth going through the whole arcade, basically.
We go to the dentist 6 monthly,
Yep.
or perhaps annually. How often should a horse be looked at?
When they're young, they should go 6 monthly too. So you generally say 2.5 or before they're first ridden, and that's generally just taking off sharp edges. But at 2.5, they start to change their baby teeth, and that's when they can start to get problems if their teeth aren't shedding at the same time. We can get this hyper-erupting problem that I was talking about before.
To me, it's astounding that the mouth can control all its behaviour.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a comfort thing. If they're not comfortable, then it's going to affect the way they hold their body, and then they'll start getting tense muscles back through parts of their system. So that's going to become uncomfortable, and they'll start moving in different patterns. So it's not just about comfort within the mouth, it's about the whole body. It also obviously affects their digestion. If you've got particles of grass that are not being chewed properly, they can colic quite easily, things like that. So yeah, it's the whole body.
So before we start, you're going to find out externally where there could be problems.
Yeah, well, you can just find out that there are, definitely something going on. So we just tend to look at the symmetry of the horse's muscling, its head, come down the side. Something people can do for themselves if you just feel up under here. So he's going, don't touch me there because it's got sharp edges that are sticking into his cheeks. If I come into the side of him here and just gently put some pressure on there.
The ears have gone back.
Yeah, he's not too bad at side. He doesn't really like it, but this side he's very much don't touch me there. So that straight away to me shouts dental problem before I even look in his mouth. And then I would tend to open up the lips and just make sure we've got 6 teeth top and bottom. And if you come round behind me, you'll see that he's actually got what we call a diagonal bite. So his teeth are longer on the top on this side and on the bottom on the other side.
And don't touch me there.
Yeah, and he's like just pretty much leave me alone all over my mouth, really.
So you're a vet and you're going to tranquilise or quietly
Sedate the horse.
Why is that important?
Lots of different reasons. For a start, we want to make the process kind of calm, safe for both the horse and everyone else concerned. So we want to get them in a happy place so that we can make it a good experience for them. Also, when we're putting the speculum on, which opens up their mouth, when they're sedated, you can get it open, you can examine the whole mouth, you can get right to the back of the mouth. What we tend to find is when we don't have them sedated, a lot of times the horse is trying to fight you, the horse is potentially restricting the access to the very back of the mouth. And so to get a really good thorough job done, we want them calm, we want them happy with what we're going to do as a procedure, and we want to evaluate the whole mouth and get to the back of the mouth. And it tends to be in most horses, we have to get them sedated for that.
Not everybody does it. Is there room for every horse to be sedated?
Yeah, I mean, it depends a little bit on what they're going to have done. Sometimes you can do kind of routine maintenance of various areas of the mouth without too much sedation, but to really evaluate the whole mouth, you need to have them sedated to get to those areas. So we would recommend, in general, to do a proper evaluation with sedation and getting the whole mouth examined at least once a year. If you've got one small access point to do, you might be able to get it done, but realistically you need to get the sedation to get that full exam, and as Claire said, once a year or thereabouts, just to make sure everything's evaluated and everything's done.
Now I saw that you checked the heartbeat on this particular horse.
Yeah. Well, we use it as an opportunity to go through like a routine healthcare check for them as well. So, you know, one thing when we're sedating them, we're putting a drug into the system, we want to make sure that their heart is healthy, that there's no heart murmur, that there's no arrhythmia, anything that the drugs we're putting into them would affect. The other thing is it's a good opportunity for us to evaluate other things in the horse, right? To make sure that the heart's good, make sure that there's no other health issues that we can address just on a routine basis. So it's kind of like a warrant of fitness for them as well, and so we can use it for the horse's benefit in other ways as well.
So you're just sedating it, there's no problem, it'll come out of it with a grin all over its face.
Yeah, I mean it just keeps them kind of sleepy. They don't lie down. Sometimes they stumble a little bit when they get to find their balance. They've got 4 feet, and if they put them at the 4 corners, they find it a little easier to balance. Sometimes they sway a little bit. But yeah, I mean it's a pretty easy procedure for them. They just have a nice sleep, chill out, enjoy the procedure.
So basically what he's got is this. I was talking to you before about how they don't use the whole arcade to chew all the time. So he's got an angle to that part of his tooth, and then it gets longer as you go towards the outside, and that's what's stopping him getting across. And then as you go right to the back, he's got just little hooks on the back really. It's quite sharp on the outside, and he's got quite a bit of what we call enamel ridging, so all these ridges up and through here, all these ridges going across the tooth, can you see that? They shouldn't be like that. That locks that backwards and forwards movement. So we need to take those out. So the teeth actually grind really well when they're a lot flatter. They're not designed to have be all rough and bumpy and lumpy. It's a bit like a mortar and pestle. Smooth surfaces grind really well. They actually get their grind from the angle of the arcades of teeth, not from lumps and bumps on the tooth.
So you've taken the rack out, for the want of a better term. What happens
Yeah, I've done
next?
what I call the bulldozing. So I've gone and taken all the high teeth and the sharp edges off. And now I'm going to do the incisors where we've got good sedation, because for them that's the worst bit.
Yep.
The incisors at the front tend to be, they're just a single rooted tooth, and they vibrate quite a bit while we're working on them. They don't really like it because you can't say, hey, we're trying to help you here. So
Well, we
fix
can
this
say
up
that,
next.
but it's not going to believe you.
And then I'll go back into the back and finish off once I've done this, got this sorted out.
So this is the front bit, so that the top and the bottom can move across.
Yep, I mean I want to correct this diagonal bite, but I've already got the lateral excursion in the back. You can see how his teeth are being pushed, like the alignment should be across here, and his jaw's being pushed way sideways. I've taken off all the sharp edges and even out the high points in the back of the mouth and any teeth that are protuberant. And then I've been and worked on the incisors and corrected the wedge, the diagonal bite, for as much as we can for the source at this point in time.
So basically he'll be a different horse now.
Yep, we've given him back full function, and that's going to make him comfortable, and his whole demeanour will change. He'll become a much happier horse. He'll be able to make better use of the food that he gets. His weight will increase. He will perform better. He'll just be a lot more laid back, basically.
When do you want to see him again?
12 months.
And it won't be such a big deal next time.
Definitely not, but I will still get him sedated. The problem with horses being done unsedated is that the teeth right at the back of the mouth never get done, and also the incisors don't get done sufficiently, and it is a problem for the horse. You know, it's a bit like you wouldn't get the farrier in and get them to trim 3 feet and not the 4th one, but this is what is happening with the mouth all the time. You know, not all the teeth are being done, and because all their teeth are in contact at the same time, a problem anywhere creates a problem overall.
In just a moment or two, we'll be talking about young farmers and the fact that it's not just a blokes organisation anymore. Terry, the grand final for the Young Farmer of the Year looming, and it's a pretty exciting one.
It is, and it's our 49th year. We're going to be in fielding in the Manawatu, and a little bit in Palmerston North as well. But yes, it's really exciting. The calibre of people this year is as high as ever. In fact, I personally think it's probably our strongest grouping yet, considering they're all first-time grand finalists. As you know, you can do it twice if you don't succeed the first time. But so they're a level playing field, so the standard is high but relatively even. But the backgrounds of these people is what I'm really excited about.
So what are they?
So we've got, well, first of all, in terms of diversity, we've got a woman in the grand final, which is something I'm extremely excited about. It's only the 4th woman in 49 years that's made it through. And no, you don't have to be a bodybuilder and chuck tractor tyres around to make it into grand final. It is all about your brain. And she is going to be there not to make the numbers up, she's there to win, which is awesome. We have 3 dairy farmers, 2 sheep and beef farmers, a rural contractor and a rural professional in the mix. So really representing industry quite well, rather than it. Traditionally we've had 7 farmers. This is a little bit more diverse than that. We've got people that have quite a clear urban background as well as rural background. So there's something for everyone in there, and there's going to be quite a big social media campaign around the grand finalists. They've all got a People's Choice Award to try and win, and so they're going to have a massive social media presence that's being supported by FMG. So people got this real opportunity now to learn about these people from the 22nd of May. The media's going to be bombarded by these magnificent seven.
So you're talking communication as well as everything else as far as the skill?
Yeah, and we've got an obligation, I believe, in showcasing what our industry really is about, not what just the naysayers say. The fact that the modern generation of industry professionals are well-rounded, strong, articulate individuals, and we need people to convey that message, not to someone like me who represents these kind of people in an organisation, but the people doing it. Being able to clearly say, this is my career, this is what I do, I'm really proud of it, I'm really good at what I do, and in fact New Zealand benefits from what I do. So that kind of message is only good for us.
Are we shaking off the black singlet syndrome?
Yes, and we don't want to forget that either. I think our economy is built on the fact that we can produce material or ingredients or food of the very highest standard. It has to come from the land. So we don't want to forget that, but actually our protagonists out there are people that are incredibly gifted in technology and technology application. They understand about sustainability, they understand about market forces, market access and what the consumer actually wants to have from our products. They understand about traceability, they understand about biosecurity. A generation ago, farmers would have sat here and gone, what? I just produced the food. And there's nothing wrong with that either. But if we're going to be competitive in the world, then it's the standard of ability of the next generation that's really exciting.
I'm blown away, Terry, by what cell phones can do in a farmer's hand nowadays.
Yeah, and it's critical that we get this rural broadband right too, because we're hamstrung by how much we can utilise that technology particularly on farm. Yeah, everything these days can be done on a phone. The uptake of smartphone technology on farm is extremely high, one of the highest in the world. So again, the developments and innovation that's occurring that can be driven from a phone on farm is brilliant. We just need these young people to be helping the technologists and innovators to reach that tipping point so technology becomes affordable by the number of people that are using it. And we're a really good vehicle for that, to try and get that message out that we've got applications or all kinds of technology that are going to make a real difference.
Your organisation's come a long way in a very short time.
Yeah, we're really looking at our strategy of who we are and why we're here at the moment. I've got a 2-year project to really sort of transform the organisation, really, because originally Young Farmers was set up to socially connect people together and look at some skill development and some leadership development. Actually, these days we're, if you like, an industry good organisation in our own right that's helping to deliver strategy for the industry around talent attraction, around talent development, and making a real difference to an economic value of the industry.
You're obviously working on just a very broad base now, not just farmers, but are you making the whole industry sexy?
Well, that's the ambition. So, traditionally our strengths have been in agriculture, so sheep and beef and dairy. We work a lot with rural professionals, so people that work for seed companies or fertiliser companies and the like, and make those sort of connections. Our big challenge is how do we take that body of work and strength and make a bigger impact into horticulture, arable, viticulture, which we don't seem naturally to fit. New Zealand Young Farmers isn't necessarily, as an organisation, a natural title or image that other industries might gravitate to. So we're going to try and overcome that and be more relevant. And I think young farmer clubs will always be called New Zealand Young Farmer Clubs because we've been going back to 1927. But to be relevant in today's market, working with commercial partners in industry, we need to perhaps look at how we market ourselves in the broader sense.
So how does somebody in Auckland who is in an Auckland school who wants to get involved with your industry find you?
So yeah, that's a really good question. I'll use a very topical answer to that. So one of our grand finalists, Lisa Kendall, and as I say, she's the 4th woman ever to get through to grand final. She comes from a an urban background in Auckland, in Karaka, South Auckland. Parents have nothing to do with our industry. Her father's an electrical engineer, mother's a lawyer. They live on a lifestyle block. Went to Strathallan School in Karaka, which is a private school, with friends that were from farms, and decided in year 13, you know what, I want to do agriculture. And the school were not supportive in that one little bit. They wanted her to do a commerce degree at Auckland. And she kept saying, well, you must have stuff about agriculture. And finally they gave her some information about Lincoln, and down she came, and she's done a couple of qualifications now through Lincoln and actually runs her own business, contracting to lifestyle block owners in Auckland who like the idea of living on 20 or 30 acres but don't want to get their hands dirty. So carved out a real niche for herself. And so how do we convert someone who's, you know, very articulate and urban into our industry? And we've got a young farmers club in Franklin, for example, which is our whole Pukekohe, South Auckland area. And so the opportunity for us to actually think, okay, how do these guys go into schools and go, you know what, this is what we do. Ethel New, who is our reigning grand champion of the Young Farmer of the Year, goes into schools and talks about, well, look, you know, I'm 28, 29, I'm in the top 1% income earners in New Zealand. How do you think I did that? You know, because it needs those kind of powerful messages that young people can go, wow, I hadn't even considered that.
That opens the door for us to talk about the two lower tiers from the grand finalists.
Yeah, and I tell you what, we've put a lot of emphasis into future-proofing where we're going. So Agri-Kids and Teenags, a primary school and secondary school, we run a parallel competition event. It's the same way we do the FMG Young Farmer of the Year, obviously age appropriate in terms of skill levels and stuff. But we've raised the standard of Teenag in particular. Now it's really like a junior Young Farmer of the Year in terms of what they need to do. As in, there is an exam, there is a speech, there is all those extra things rather than just modules. And this year we grew, the Teenag competitions grew by 25% in terms of the entrants. We're at capacity now, so I've now challenged my team. Okay, well the model's broken. We can only traditionally been able to do 32 teams competing of two at each regional final, and so four streams. We're now going to actually have to do 6 streams per region from next year to cope with the demand. You know, we've now got nearly 2,500 Teenag members. That's up 30% on last year. So there's a groundswell at school level, and we're gaining more and more into that non-rural, urban and Auckland is our focus. Not to drop rural behind, but our growth area is going to be in this urban space to attract these people. We want to make sure that the pool of people coming into primary industry isn't our traditional pool. The traditional pool of rural New Zealand isn't big enough for the direction the industry is going in. So if we can get secondary school students interested, and it might not be farming per se, but it might be in marketing or engineering. You know, we know that Fonterra is the biggest employer of engineers in New Zealand, so we need to talk to people, well, if you want to do engineering or process engineering, actually there is an endpoint here of a career path through the likes of a Fonterra or an ANSCO or whoever. If you want to be in marketing, great, go and do marketing. One of the sexiest parts of marketing, I believe, is food marketing. You know, international markets. So again, going into schools and talking those sorts of careers is quite pivotal to actually having a change of opinion of our industry.
Indeed, exciting times for the young farmers in New Zealand. Just a moment or two, how the wool season is going and just exactly what is likely to happen and when. John, the wool story, it's not all good news.
Well, the market it's come down a lot, as we know. I think I've mentioned that several times now. It has come off. It's certainly, if you go back to the start of the season, the New Zealand cent crossbred indicator is something like $1.50 less than it was at the start of the season. Reasons for that, which we've just been discussing, and I hate saying it again and again, but it all revolves around the downturn of New Zealand wool exports to China. Something like they're down by 38%, which is a big figure, and that wool essentially is not going anywhere. what I just said before is what you're really talking about is you've taken 20% demand out of the New Zealand wool market, and which explains the price drop and explains the market difficulties that we're now facing. Business goes on, business is going on all the time outside China, other parts of Asia, Europe, East and West Europe, all ongoing, which is good, but the volume, the overall volume's not there that we need to actually get the market conditions improve, make the market conditions improve.
We've always been a wee bit vulnerable with the number of eggs in that basket.
Yeah. Well, not so long ago, China was 55%. If you go back 3 or 4 years, it was 55% of New Zealand's exports, which is a big number. And exactly that, what you're saying is I certainly, and other people in the industry, you feel vulnerable. Well, you don't like that because it's too high. And so we're paying a bit of the price for that now. There's some new markets, some smaller markets that are taking more wool, but nowhere near the volumes that we need to take up that hole that I've just talked about.
Why have China gone quiet?
Well, it's a fashion. The Australian wool market's going gangbusters. The merino, the fine wool growers are having a great time. What's happened is essentially demand for product in China. The consumer wants something finer, and when you say finer, you mean higher value. You mean more. He just wants an article that goes away from the traditional coarse end of the New Zealand market that fed apparel, blankets, upholsteries. They want a finer type wool. So your traditional 30 to 37 micron, 36 micron that we produce a lot of, the demand has fallen away. But that demand has gone and shifted into finer type wools. And as I said, they're having a great time, record highs.
So you and I have talked fashion and how do you make a certain type fashionable?
Yeah. So the people that have been in the industry a long time say it will rebalance. And they're saying the fine end now is getting to a stage where it's unsustainable and there'll be a rebalancing back into the coarser end again. But it's very hard sitting here today to say to you when that will happen. It will happen, and we keep looking for signs that it is happening, but I can't tell you at this stage that I can't give you any time frame for that. So at the moment, we're doing the best we can in quite a difficult environment.
You wouldn't be suggesting that people send their mid-micron and coarser wools cheap to the processing company and go to merinos?
Well, that's I'm sure that may be happening a wee bit, but I don't know if we're at that point. You can go back over 20 or 30 years, and we have been through these periods before. Something will happen, and there will be a change in demand back or whatever. But very frustrating for everybody in the industry at the moment. And I can feel for the growers. I mean, it's a very difficult pill to swallow, these levels, when not so long ago they were substantially higher than they are today.
But don't chase fashion. Stick to your knitting, is that?
Well, stick to your knitting, and we hope. We're in a free world, and we've seen things rebalance and change back to what we would call normal operating times or normal levels. So we're waiting for that. But yeah, and we're going to have to wait a bit more, I'm afraid.
Flock numbers have already dropped.
Yes.
Have they stabilised?
Yes, I think the latest information would suggest they have stabilised. It's something around 26, 27 million head of sheep over the country. They're talking that plus even an increase in certain areas because of wool weights, growing conditions. In the halcyon days, as I said before, 72 million, I think it peaked at. That was in the early 70s, I think. So we're a long way off that, but we're still struggling to sell it, even at these levels, at these production levels today.
But the meat price is going to carry the sheep
The
market.
beef, yeah, the beef is doing well, the meat's doing well, thank goodness. So it'll be nice when I can sit here, Rob, and say that the wool is carrying the meat price, but I think we're a bit of a long way off at the moment.
But thank you for your honesty, because there's a lot of farmers who'll be sitting there going, we really wanted to know what was really happening.
Yeah. Well, I think you've got to, because then everybody knows where they are and they understand the situation.
Indeed, just hang in there, I think, is the answer. In just a moment or two, we'll be talking to John Wally about things economy-wise. I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website, ontheland.co.nz.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
I was going to ask how things going.
Oh, well, where do you start on that one? If we start in New Zealand, we've got election year, we've got Budget Thursday, we've got the standard question, can National get out from under housing and water? And will the other side be seen as fiscally responsible? That sums it up. Budget Thursday, well, nobody's talking about how much there isn't to spend. It's all gone quiet. That dog's not barking. So I wonder what the giveaway is going to be on Thursday.
Labour and Greens?
Labour and Greens, well, they're having their discussions around more houses, their discussions around better water. But the question is, where does all the money come from to pay for it? So we're back to the fiscal responsibility on the other side.
Where's the Reserve Bank sitting at the moment?
Well, it's sitting where it's been sitting for the past 6, 7, 9, 12 months. No change. Looking forward, maybe a bit tougher, with a bit more inflation showing out there, but we're still well into 2019 before we start to see a change in the base rates. So things are sort of like steady.
Banks are lending?
Banks are sort of being a bit tougher on lending, and cost for lending is going up. So without the OCR moving, banks are increasing their margins, they're increasing the costs, and they're being a bit fussier about who they're lending the money to.
So they're a bit nervous.
I think there's nervousness, and for our banks, it's basically nervousness in Australia. So it tends to sort of percolate out of head office.
What about geopolitics? Because you're big on that.
Well, you know, what have we seen over the weekend? We've seen English and Abe talking about the TPP-11. If you think about the old TPP, America was the prize. Japan didn't want to get into it at the beginning. And New Zealand and Japan are at sort of different ends of the agricultural tariff spectrum. The very fact that Japan and New Zealand are talking about maybe we can get it back on track without the Americans, and coming out of Vietnam over the weekend is that, hey, this is sort of like, we might all be interested in this because there's the security dimension. Or shall we say, no, sorry, got that wrong, the strategic dimension. So when you hear it's not trade, it's strategic, read security. And this is all bound up with the worries around North Korea. So that's giving a bit of extra impetus to make it happen without the US.
What about Europe?
France followed the Dutch and didn't go to the popularist Marie Le Pen National Front type politics. So we stayed away from the Trump, let's make X great. So let's make France great, let's make Germany great, let's make America great. the nationalist type politics. So maybe Trump Brexit's the high watermark on the world turning inwards towards more nationalism. Macron in France, early elections in Germany all suggest that the continental Europe at least isn't being attracted by the popularist nonsense about China taking our jobs and the world's all coming to an end, etc., etc.
And of course the UK is looking at an early one.
Well, the UK's in the middle of an election in terms of re-Brexiting Brexit, so that discussion there is basically May going back to the country and saying, I need a mandate to take us out of Europe. And all of the commentary suggests that she's going to get it.
One word, Trump.
Oh, where do you begin with Trump? There was a comment that I think it was the leader of the House was we could do with a little less drama. Yeah, a little less drama. I mean, he sacks the #1 policeman in North America, James Comey, having said to him, you know, it might be a good idea if you let my mate off. You know, I'm trying to pervert the course of justice. This is like, you know, a president doesn't say something like that to the top coppers in sort of like in passing. You know, this is a deliberate act. And then he says to the people who are in the middle of the problem, yeah, I had to get rid of him because, what was the comment? He's a nut job. And, you know, the investigation into my ties with you, it'll all go away now. I've fired him. And there's somebody in the room taking notes. And that somebody, or somebody connected to that somebody, then releases it all to the media. It just beggars belief.
I mean, impeached keeps coming up in conversation.
Well, there's that conversation about impeachment. It's a long process. It could still be there to the total term. But now they've put the special investigator, Robert Mueller, who had Comey's job before Comey. And to all reports, Mueller is fair-minded, balanced, apolitical, and will do a good job. But it's a legal process. It's a legal investigation in the US. Can take a long time.
And very expensive.
And lots of things can go wrong in the interim. You know, Trump only needs a few days to make things really bad. It goes sort of bad to worse to terrible to, oh, we need another scale. Well, let's start at terrible. Where can we go before that? It's just incredible. It really is
If
incredible.
it wasn't so serious, it would be hilarious,
Oh,
John.
hey, you know, you saw English comment, you know, I don't like to comment on domestic US politics. It's really hard because the spillover
This huge.
impacts us.
Official cash rate for New Zealand?
Well, it's still stuck there, not changing, and won't change for a long time.
Well, that's a very short conversation.
Well, it is. There is growing inflationary pressure, but it's 2019 sometimes. 2019 sometimes.
Now, what about our markets? How are the world markets looking?
Well, they've gone sour a little bit, and in the aftermath of the last week with Trump, there's been the Trump bump has disappeared, and world markets are struggling a fair bit right now. But still, you know, it's struggling's relative. It's not really much worse than it was this time last year.
So, election year, at the dollar, where are we heading?
The dollar, from a lot of exporters' viewpoints, is still higher than it's comfortable, but it's lower than is really uncomfortable too. So in the high 60s, around that 70 mark, isn't so bad. Election year, I think the election year is going to be really about this budget, what this budget does around the working for families and tax brackets. So it's the jams that the Brits talk about. They're just about making it. What do we do for that part of the population that are just about making it now? So shift in tax thresholds, lifting the rates where the rates change, some work around working for families. In the broader policy, it's what's going to happen with housing and water. Is that really going to be credible from the government's viewpoint? and are the alternatives offered by the other side more attractive? And that could well be the turnout of where the election sits. Budget, housing, water.
That's going to be the big question.
Yep.
So it's Auckland, isn't it?
Well, if you start to talk about geopolitics inside New Zealand, Auckland's it. And Auckland is challenged from the housing perspective, it's challenged from the infrastructure perspective, and for those of us who go there regularly, it's getting worse, and somehow it's going to have to be dealt with.
Is there a silver bullet, very briefly?
No. If there was a silver bullet, it would have been fired years ago. It's going to cost. On the one hand, we've got to say to the territorial authority, fix it, or we're going to say, you're not fixing it, central government's fixing it. You can't really say, just keep banging the rates up, and no, you can't have a petrol tax. You know?
John, thank you very much indeed. If you'd like to recap on what John was saying, you can go to our website, which is ontheland.co.nz. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed the program, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.